Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining today. Mike Moore, Senior Manager over our Network Security Portfolio at Insight. And as Claire mentioned, we've got Dmitry Topslovsky, who's joining from our Security Services Portfolio. And today we're going to be talking about mitigating risk and avoiding technical debt through a zero trust framework. And as Claire mentioned, we've got quite the agenda for you. The first 30 minutes are going to be Dmitry and I talking about really what's going on in the market, the hype around zero trust, how organizations are leveraging zero trust to optimize how they're approaching their security strategy as a whole, and then look at some of the reference architectures and some best practices on how you can approach that, even if you've already started down the path or you're just trying to get dangerous on the zero trust concept. And then I'll hand it back to Claire and we'll get to the raffle stuff. So with that, I wanted to start with a couple of findings that we have from a survey that we released this year. So yearly, Insight will go out and we create a survey. We work with Foundry, formerly IDG, to survey various individuals. I think we had 400 respondents this year, director level and above, from multiple verticals, and really focusing on what are their top priorities in IT and really what are they trying to achieve with their IT strategy to build those business outcomes. And one of the key things that we found through the key themes throughout the survey was optimization, and not only optimizing the existing infrastructure that they had, but also how they're purchasing and consuming and integrating IT systems moving forward. So another key theme was data. How can we leverage the data that we have internally for our business processes to optimize how we're going to market? How do we improve revenue? But also some of the external data sources like IoT and OT, starting to get a handle on how we can leverage external information to change the way that we're interacting with our customers, interact with the way we're performing maintenance in factories and equipment to make it more predictive and more meaningful for clients. So the data and application, I actually had a real world example of that where Amazon is actually leveraging a storefront in the Love Field Airport. I was there last week. It's the first time I've ever seen it. It was a completely automated storefront. You walk in, it's got basically electronic gates. So you scan with a QR code, get in there, you can grab a water bottle, grab a bag of chips, grab your sandwich, and you just walk out. You don't have a cash register. You don't have anyone to interact with. It just bills it directly to your account. And that's some of the outcomes that we're starting to see to get those differentiated customer experiences through the use of edge devices and IoT. And really, to make things like that happen, it all depends on the platforms that are lying underneath. So whether it's the edge, compute, whether it's in the cloud and the data center, how we're interconnecting that with the different network components that all go into place to make that performant. But then wrapping that all together with a layer of security, because nobody wants to be the next headline in the news. I know the past couple years, attacks have gotten more sophisticated. We've seen ransomware in the oil and gas industry. We've seen it in manufacturing plants. So really, as we approach these next-gen use cases when it comes to leveraging our data in IoT and connecting users and devices, regardless of where they are, we need to make sure that they're inherently secure. And that's why that concept of zero trust that we're going to talk about has become more and more prevalent. And as we talk about optimizing, that security conversation becomes really relevant. So some of the top things we noticed here, talking about malware, ransomware, being able to improve threat detection, not only to identify it when the environment, when it occurs, but also to quickly be able to remediate that. And we're going to look at some technologies that have some automated capabilities built into that to quickly detect those with threat intelligence built in behind it and quarantine those devices on your network. But when we're talking zero trust, it's not just going to be about the architectures. It's also about the process. It's about the tools. And Dmitry will dive into that here in the next couple slides. But really creating a holistic security strategy around it and not just relying on the tool set. So we're all focused on improving our customer experiences, whether we're in the healthcare industry, whether we're in manufacturing or in the digital space, but also everyone's dealing from work from home. So there's so many different edges that we need to be able to secure. And that's why zero trust is becoming more and more important. Now, from a technical debt perspective, I really view technical debt in three different ways. The first being just legacy systems that are in your environment, aging, end of support, end of life devices, where if an outage occurs and you aren't able to get that device back up, it can cause excessive downtime. Another would be the legacy platforms where you can't automate with those or integrate them together to get a holistic view of the environment and to really streamline how you're delivering your IT services. The third piece would be where the origin of technical debt came from, would be application technical debt. So that's where you take expedient shortcuts to really get to market with your application rather than building those applications for scale and for future integrations. A good example of that was Southwest Airlines. You guys probably heard about some of the flight debacles they had earlier this year, and that all was due to a legacy application not being able to support the flight crews and changes when we had a severe weather system that rolled through the US. So it's not just the airlines that are affected. You can see the stats here, 86% of the organizations that we surveyed were affected by technical debt and their ability to innovate, and also meeting SLAs and the outages and downtimes that's associated with that. So I'll hand it over here to Dimitri now, and he'll dive into what Zero Trust is and how this starts to apply to some of the concepts we just talked about.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. So I want to dive into the concept of Zero Trust, talk about some of the misconceptions and also some of the best practices around Zero Trust. So Zero Trust, it's an overused term. You hear a lot about it in the news lately. What is Zero Trust, right? Zero Trust is a framework or strategy to only trust users' devices after explicitly confirming their status and identity. So there's a really neat quote from the NIST Zero Trust architecture that the goal of Zero Trust is to prevent unauthorized access to data and services while making access control enforcement as granular as possible. So it basically captures the goal of Zero Trust. What are you trying to achieve with Zero Trust is to ensure you protect the data and also ensure that you detect any breaches or intrusions as fast as possible. So Zero Trust approach it's taken the entire IT organization, IT operations, security and breaking into smaller pieces where you can look at data, devices, users, infrastructure, and build controls around those specific items. And they call them pillars in the Zero Trust parlance. So focusing on those, building controls around them, and building security around those items that you want to protect. But it's not just about the data you're trying to protect. It's also about processes and people and the procedures that go around it. It's not the tools, but it's the holistic approach to security. It's policies that you put in place to protect the data, but also how do you enforce those policies, making sure that people follow the same processes and procedures that you outline. In order to tackle Zero Trust, there's several architectures. We a lot of times reference the NIST special publication 800-207, which is a approach describes Zero Trust reference architecture, breaking down each pillar and providing real-world examples of how you implement Zero Trust on specific cases and specific tackling each pillar. How would you implement Zero Trust around those specific items you want to protect? Yeah, some of the key initiatives that kind of pushed Zero Trust to the forefront, I'll highlight the big one is hybrid work. So since 2 years ago, we've drastically had to change our workforce, right? It went from an office-only environment to hybrid work or remote work. Old technologies like VPNs have become not able to sustain the amount of users that had to contend with. So ability to work from anywhere kind of enabled became a must for organizations. With that, you introduce risk of an increased attack surface. People connecting from homes, from Starbucks, from their phones. So how do you protect access from those devices? And Zero Trust is the way to tackle that. And we'll go in provide some use cases of how Zero Trust can address some of these key challenges. And I'll touch upon some of the key technologies that Zero Trust is kind of working with, things like multi-factor authentication, next-generation firewalls to detect threats as soon as possible. Same goes for next-generation SIEMs, and with built-in SOAR capabilities, things like Sentinel that allow you to detect threats and take actions immediately. But technology is not, like I was mentioning before, is not Zero Trust is not just technology; it's people and processes, which kind of brings me to the next point: is some of the misconceptions that we have around Zero Trust. And one of them, obviously, is people think it's a product. Zero Trust is a product, what can be solved by a product. But Zero Trust is it's more of a strategy initiative, and it's the best way to stop breaches that we have at this point. It helps minimize the risk, lowers the attack surface, and enables you to detect incidents faster. The other misconception that a lot of people have is Zero Trust, by its definition, means you do not trust your employees. And Zero Trust is all about removing the implicit trust from your organization. Um, I like to use the concept of firewalls, the security levels. The outside is considered a security level 0. You do not trust any connection comes into it. You have to explicitly allow those connections in. The internal access was level 100, so everything was allowed, right? Zero trust means you assign level 0 to everything. All your connections are level 0. You do not trust them until you explicitly verify them and explicitly allow them to get in. So the zero trust adage is basically never trust, always verify. So using that, you can ensure that you're always checking for connections. Another misconception about zero trust is that it's hard to implement. But with the latest technologies that we have in place, a lot of the initiatives and by Microsoft, Palo Alto, all these vendors investing a lot into the latest technologies, is using AI and ML. That enables you to utilize this existing tool sets with the capabilities built in that you can utilize them to tackle your zero trust challenges. Things like things like AI and ML already built into a lot of the technologies, and it's easy to adopt because a lot of times you already have the tools, and it's all about optimization, right? Like optimizing the tools you already have. It doesn't mean buying new technologies. It's using what you have and tying them all together in this framework. And one other misconception is that there's only one way of implementing zero trust. And a lot of times people just focus on one way, but there's many ways you can tackle zero trust. Some people tackle the identity road first, implementing SSO, MFA. Some people go to network-centric approach, go ZTNA segmentation, utilizing some of the SASE technologies. So don't think there's only one way of implementing it. It's find a way that works for you and move along the journey. I want to highlight some of the benefits of zero trust, but also focus on the pillars. So the key pillars of zero trust is, like I mentioned before, is verifying explicitly. Never trust, always verify. So check the connections, check the services, check the users to ensure that they are who they are. The concept of least privilege is key. You want to make sure that you only grant access to the right resources, and it's only the right resources for the amount of time that the access is needed, nothing more. And last key principle of zero trust is assuming breach, right? So assuming that an attacker gains a foothold in your environment, and how do you first detect it, and then also prevent them from gaining access to your sensitive data. And this key benefit, actually, this key principle of zero trust kind of talks to a good benefit of zero trust is basically limiting the attack surface, right? So when you think you're assuming breach, that means how do you ensure that an attacker does not move laterally once they get a foothold in your organization, that they do not get access to all your sensitive data. And it also means that access can be detected, right? Like an intrusion can be detected. Latest surveys have listed that mean time to detection is around 323 days. That's almost a year. So having an intruder in your organization for almost a year, that cannot happen, right? So zero trust, adopting zero trust concepts and frameworks helps you detect breaches faster, and basically detecting by detecting anomalous behaviors, you can stop and prevent intrusions and exfiltration of your sensitive information. The other key benefit is automated threat response. So basically, when detecting a risky sign-in, you can limit access to a specific device or resource, or you can actually quarantine the specific device or network if it's found to be an intruder. I kind of want to move to highlight some of the reference architecture and how zero trust concepts and the key pillars of zero trust, how it helps organizations to focus on the things they're trying to protect. Key aspect of cybersecurity is identifying what you're trying to protect. And the zero trust reference architecture breaks things down into pillars. So the small digestible parts that you can actually focus on and build controls around it. So if you can focus on, users and identity, identifying how you want to protect the users, protecting devices, network application workloads, data, and then kind of how do you automate and orchestrate a lot of the automated responses, but also how do you ensure you have visibility and analytics into what's going on in your network. So when you look at the users and identity pillar, utilizing some of the identity management building block, or like access management and governance, that those key pieces, technologies and processes will go along adopting zero trust concepts for the users and identity pillar. If you look at the data, how do you encrypt data? How do you classify data and tag it so you can protect it? If you have sensitive information, you can tag it and create specific rules to not allow that access to be exfiltrated out of your environment. Things about like networking, things you can segment the data that talks about the limiting the attack surface, right? So segmenting your networks via network components that limit your access of the intruder. It'll be isolated to one specific small segment of the environment, not everything. So it goes away from the concept of once you're inside the network, you have access to everything, to you only have access to what you need. Your lateral movements are limited. And that's the overall pieces about the reference architecture. I wanted to hand off to Mike to kind of dive into more of the network aspects of it.
Yeah, and I'll take back control, Dimitri, too, if you could pass me the ball. But a couple of things I wanted to add to this. So one of the misconceptions was that implementing zero trust is not hard. And you may take a look at this and be like, wow, that is a lot, because it really does encompass the entire IT infrastructure. And Dimitri's going to talk some best practices in a bit, but the old adage where how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? I mean, it's really figuring out where the most important part is and where the quick wins are, that you can really start improving your posture. And there's various levels of zero trust, good, better, best, and it's defined in the zero trust NIST special publication as advanced or traditional, advanced, and optimized. But really getting to a point where you're getting these integrated solutions. And when it comes to technical debt, typically in a security environment, there could be 40, 50, 60 different security products in an environment doing similar things and similar functionalities that we have to pivot between. So we've seen a lot of push from the market in general around platform consolidation. We know Microsoft has a big suite of tools. Cisco has a big suite of tools that we're going to actually look at next, where we get a lot of these capabilities through limited partner sets and not having to manage multiple partner relationships for these different types of security appliances. So looking at Cisco specifically, they really align their approach to three different areas: the workforce, which would be your users and identity and the devices, and how we're providing connectivity to those. Dimitri talked about zero trust network access and Duo, which is their MFA solution that provides that kind of granular access to applications. So you can provide BYOD users access to maybe one specific application that they need that is either hosted in the cloud or on-prem. We've actually seen instances of devices iOS devices or Android devices that are on like smart refrigerators and other IoT enabled devices, where we can put these agents on there and actually get headless devices to communicate only to the apps they need to. We've seen this in medical refrigerators where they only need access to go in and talk to a SaaS-based portal to provide that access, and then no other connectivity is needed. That's the type of granular access we can get for both users and endpoints through those ZTNA type solutions. The network component, I'm going to dive into it a little bit deeper, but the switching infrastructure, the wireless infrastructure, even the routing infrastructure, looking at the next gen technologies that integrate well together, that you can automate and quickly deploy sites and integrate with security solutions, are really key when it comes to zero trust. Automation and orchestration is one of the key tenets of zero trust, and same in the data center. So even being able to configure the underlying network infrastructure, but also getting visibility into the applications that you have at the data center. Cisco Tetration is a good tool to that, to map the workflows between the different devices and actually create policies to make sure that only the correct apps are talking to each other. So if one application is compromised, you can't have lateral movement within your data center. And same goes for Cisco Identity Services Engine, which is more on the network side of the house, that provides that granular layer of network segmentation. And I actually have a case study that's coming up next that we'll dive deep into that one. And then tying everything together through some kind of XDR or a SOAR. Cisco has SecureX, which is actually a free service currently for anyone who's purchased a Cisco security product. You can actually integrate all of those, including third-party products, where you can quickly pivot between platforms as you're doing your active threat hunting, which is pretty amazing when you're trying to focus on identifying and remediating endpoints as quickly as possible. So one case study I wanted to share that really hones in on the network segmentation component, as well as next-gen firewalls. This particular healthcare provider, based out of the West Coast, El Camino Health, had 13 locations. They were looking to refresh their aging infrastructure and really wanted to double down on security. They have a lot of IoT and OT devices. You think of all the medical equipment within the environment. They don't want those things walking away. They want to know where they're connected, where they're currently at, even what level of firmware that's installed on those. So as we were going through this refresh for our client, we upgraded their firewalls. We put in new switching wireless infrastructure. We layered on a new network access control solution. In this instance, it was Cisco ICE. There's different flavors of NAC out there, but this one integrated with the wireless LAN controllers, the switching, the firewall infrastructure to provide basically a complete security fabric for authenticating and authorizing users to the network. So what they were really trying to do is provide granular segmentation for their medical devices, for their different groups of users in that environment, and have the infrastructure do all the dynamic policy configuration for them. So that way, if a doctor moved from one wing of the hospital to the other, when he connected to the SSID, his same security policy follows him based on an Active Directory attribute or some other configurable attribute. When it comes to headless devices like the OT devices, the IV pumps, the X-ray machines, we actually layered on an additional visibility tool called Order, which really focuses on medical assets, gives you visibility into the firmware of those types of devices, and starts leveraging artificial intelligence and machine learning to baseline behaviors for those type of devices. So if an IV pump is only talking on 3 ports and a couple different protocols to one server in the data center, after 30 days, we can safely say that these are the only traffic flows we probably want this device talking to. It'll give us recommended policy, and we can push those out to the next gen firewalls, the switching, the wireless infrastructure, to keep that consistent policy everywhere and really reduce that attack surface. So kind of a cool next gen use case that hospitals are leveraging for zero trust to, one, get asset inventory, but also provide granular segmentation, especially in HIPAA and high trust environments where that type of data is critical to protect. So a couple more use cases for reducing technical debt. This is really conversations we're having on a day-to-day basis with client as it pertains to zero trust. Network segmentation, I just talked about from the healthcare perspective. One thing I'd add there, it's not just healthcare. We see this in retail. We actually had a customer take this for its automated onboarding capabilities. They had a lot of time spent just onboarding new devices as new stores came online, printers, cameras, workstations, point of sale machine. And with the network access control solution, you could automatically connect those devices. They could be on the same VLAN or logical segment and push dynamic policy to those based on how they were profiled or by who logged into those devices. And it ended up saying this particular client 620 hours a year in engineering hours for doing those really repetitive tasks for just configuring these things. So this is where zero trust architectures can start introducing that automation and gaining efficiency by integrating those solutions. Zero trust network access, I talked about that a little bit, and so did Dimitri, kind of the next gen VPN, as I like to think of it. So we do see that as kind of an evolution of VPN and even replacing current VPNs, because now that we have a work from anywhere or a hybrid work, we have people on site, people remote, we need to provide better access to cloud applications and to on-prem. If we think of traditional VPN solutions, a lot of the clients we have today have SaaS-based applications or leveraging infrastructure as a service. So a majority of the services they consume and applications are in the cloud. So providing direct cloud access through a ZTNA solution to a provider like Cisco Umbrella or other that's adjacent to those clouds actually provides a better experience for our customers and gives us unified policy for both branch and remote workers. And Dimitri, I'll hand it over to you for unified identity.
Thank you, Mike. So another use case, unified identity. How do you protect third-party access? Third-party access is a enormous risk, and we don't have to go very far to find use cases of breaches that involve third parties. Just last week, AT&T announced that 9 million records, personal data was breached due to a third-party intrusion. The third party got access, got hacked, and then an intrusion caused into the AT&T's environment, and 9 million records were accessed. So how do you protect that? So zero trust helps mitigate that risk by you can enable conditional policies to create and like create specific policies that detect and block access from highly risky devices or users. You can enforce least privilege, again, the key principle of zero trust, enforcing least privilege using a privileged access management or PAM solution, where you only get access to the right resources for amount of time that you need it. You don't, after the session's done, the connection's disconnected, and that you cannot reuse the same session. So if you've got compromised credentials, that session will not be live anymore. Another way to address it is using ZTNA or SASE to assess device posture. So you'll evaluate the risk of that connection and then take specific steps to either to bring the device to a specific security posture that you need, or block access from that device altogether. Another use case of zero trust that we see customers ask our help with is legacy applications. So there are cases where applications may be hosted via RDP. So sessions resides on a server, and to get access to the application, you need to actually have an RDP connection to the server. Again, it's legacy applications, but talking about technical debt, right? These things have not been modernized. So they're still existing. There's still companies use the application, use that level of access. So how do you protect those? So you can protect them by layering MFA in front of those applications. So creating what's called application proxy. Some things like Azure Application Proxy, Cisco Duo Network Gateway, or Okta's Access Gateway to allow you to ensure that the connections go through a single sign-on, a multi-factor authentication to ensure that the users who they are, and then get access to the application. We've seen cases where mainframes or older applications run SSH connections, right? So you need to have a direct SSH connection to an application. Again, the way to protect it is to provide like a PAM solution that will filter out connections initially, something like CyberArk, and only then get access to the application that you need to access via SSH. So I want to kind of go through and touch upon some of the best practices we have around zero trust. So like we talked about before, it's not about tools, it's about processes, right? It's about people. It's a combination, it's a holistic approach. So you have to take planning coordination across all of your teams to come up with practices and policies to enable zero trust adoption in your organization. Another key best practice is don't implement zero trust in a production environment. Start small, something that's non-critical, test it out, ensure you have all the dependencies, because you run the risk of outages that will cause you to delay or abandon the zero trust initiative, right? So don't try it in production. Start small, gain some traction, and then move on to the bigger areas. Another best practice is harnessing GRC efforts. A lot of companies are going through some GRC efforts, be it high trust, HIPAA, PCI, SOC 2 compliance. All those efforts have a lot of overlap with zero trust initiatives. So you can harness the GRC efforts to push along and combine those the zero trust initiatives that you have to get some quick wins. And the last best practice I would say is start somewhere, right? It doesn't matter where you start in your zero trust journey. Just find area, find a pillar that you think you need the most help with, that's the riskiest, and you can get some quick wins and tackle that, and then move on to the next pillars. And that way you can kind of keep moving and gain some buy-ins and gain some positive movement within your journey. And with that, I want to kind of hand it off to Mike to kind of close some closing comments.
Yeah, perfect, Dimitri. And I think we came in just a little over 30 minutes. So I know that was a ton of content to cover, a little bit of drinking from the fire hose, but really appreciate everyone's time today. Definitely want to say thank you. We kind of scratched the surface of zero trust today. Hopefully there were some key takeaways that kind of help you get unstuck, or hopefully maybe even make you ask a few more questions about it. If you want to continue the conversation to talk zero trust or just security strategy in general, we do have this QR code. You can scan it. It'll take you to a page where you can put in your details, and we'll reach out to have that conversation. I think you have the opportunity to put what specifically you're interested in. So feel free to take a screenshot or a picture to that.